This US military commander's extraordinary career spanned from the Wild West to the trenches of the Western Front. The only man, other than George Washington, to be promoted to General of the Armies, he overcame personal tragedy to command the American Expeditionary Force during World War I. Today, we're looking at the military career and a snapshot of the medals of General John Pershing. John Joseph Pershing was born on the eve of the US Civil War in September 1860 in Laclede, Missouri. His father, John F. Pershing, was a businessman who owned a farm and a store, and over time held a variety of responsibilities within the town, from postmaster to railway foreman. One of the young Pershing's uncles was a colonel in the Union Army during the Civil War, and was seriously wounded at the Siege of Vicksburg. As the eldest of several children, Pershing took on responsibilities early in life, helping his father with the family's general store and farm. These experiences helped shape his strong work ethic and sense of discipline. After high school, he studied at what now is Truman State University, graduating in 1880. During that time, to pay for his education, he worked as a school teacher on a princely sum of $35 a month. According to his memoirs, he had no inclination to join the army, and then one day came across a newspaper advertisement seeking candidates for the US Military Academy entrance examination. He applied and beat 16 other candidates, entering West Point in 1882, where he quickly thrived. During his time there, he was elected president of his class and appointed first captain of cadets, the highest rank a cadet could achieve. In 1886, at the age of 26, he graduated and was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the cavalry. Pershing's first assignment was to be sent out west. Much of it was still largely untamed frontier. Bear in mind, it was only a decade after the Battle of Little Bighorn, and still the height of the era of the so-called Wild West. Pershing was posted as an officer in L Troop, 6th US Cavalry, stationed in Fort Bayard, New Mexico. He was involved in the final phase of the Apache Wars. This involved 5,000 US troops campaigning famously against Apache leader Geronimo and his roughly 70 followers who rose up in rebellion against the US government. Arriving at the tail end of the conflict, Pershing's role was largely confined to patrols and garrison duty. His main notable mission was to intercept the war chief Mangus and his band, who had strayed off reservation territory. Whilst inspecting his troops the morning of the mission that they were due to embark, it appears, in British parlance the night before, the soldiers had been on the lash. He states, "It was evident that the prospect of taking to the field had led a number, including my excellent first sergeant, to patronise the bar at the post traders rather too liberally. This concept was in no accord with my conception on how troops of the regular army should appear." They probably were pretty hungover, I guess. Once over the effects of indulgence, they were entirely reliable and efficient. Mangus returned to his reservation, not requiring any further action. Pershing spent the remainder of his time setting up heliograph stations and other more mundane duties. According to his biography, in 1888, whilst on leave visiting family in Lincoln, Nebraska, Pershing got to meet the famous Colonel William F. Brodie, better known as Buffalo Bill, and his Wild West show. Up until 1890, Pershing served with the 6th Cavalry at various postings, including New Mexico, Arizona, and lastly, South Dakota. In South Dakota, he participated in the last campaigns against the Native American Lakota or Sioux tribes, known as the Ghost Dance War. Pershing led scouts and conducted patrolling. His main role was as part of a cavalry cordon around the Badlands and patrolling the Cheyenne River country. He was not involved in the main incident of the campaign, which was at Wounded Knee. Loosely involving Pershing, who was part of the regiment, the 6th Cavalry only was engaged in one significant incident, and that was the ambush of a reconnaissance party that was attempting to cross the White River. Lakota braves ambushed the party. On hearing the shots, the rest of the regiment nearby raced to the scene. When they arrived, the Lakota fled and evaded the cavalry. Not a boozer, unlike many young men of his time, Pershing avoided drinking and rarely played cards, which earned him a reputation for being unusually disciplined and focused. However, the cavalry were the dashing, flamboyant party boys of the time, so inevitably some of his fellow officers saw Pershing as a stiff, boring fuddy-duddy. In 1891, Pershing was assigned to command Troop B and a force of, I hope I've got this right, Oglala Native American Scouts. For service over this period, Pershing received the Indian Campaign Medal. We covered this in a very old video comparing Little Bighorn and Isand Luana, the two battles. I'll put a link at the end of the video if anyone's interested in learning further about the medal. During his time with the 6th Cavalry, he was promoted to First Lieutenant. After a stint as Commandant of Cadets at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, he was assigned to the 10th Cavalry Regiment, stationed at Fort Assiniboine in Montana. The 10th Cavalry Regiment were made up of African American soldiers and white officers, and were part of the renowned Buffalo Soldiers. Pershing was progressive thinking for his time, and treated his new men with respect, discipline and fairness. Having an enlightened attitude for his time, Pershing observed, "Most men of whatever race, creed or colour want to do the proper thing, and they respect the man above them whose motive is the same. I therefore had no more trouble with my men than with any other troops." Later, Pershing would earn the nickname Black Jack from fellow officers because he commanded African American troops. Although the name was meant to be derogatory, it would be embraced by the public, and over time it evolved into a badge of respect, symbolising his stern demeanour, discipline and combat effectiveness. Historian Gene Smith summarised Pershing's command style as follows. Racial matters did not seem of great interest or import to Lieutenant Pershing. It was efficiency that counted. He gained respect from his troopers by treating them fairly and equally. They affectionately nicknamed him Old Red due to his hair colour. The 10th Cavalry would go on to prove themselves as brave, disciplined and effective soldiers. Once on leave in New York, through a friend who was ex-military but now a police commissioner, Pershing dined with Theodore Roosevelt. The two hit it off. In his memoirs years later, Pershing would reminisce of this encounter. It was the most enjoyable evening, of which Roosevelt often spoke of in later years. I had no idea that his estimate of me would play such a part in my future. It was this chance social encounter with the future US President which would be his big career break in the coming years. Later, as Roosevelt's political career grew, Pershing's star would rise with it. When his assignment with the 10th finished, Pershing spent time as an aide to Lieutenant General Nelson A. Miles and then as an instructor in tactics at West Point in 1897-98. The experience proved difficult for Pershing. To his charges, he seemed a heartless martinet, rigid, unforgiving, and always ready to pounce at the slightest departure from perfect performance. The cadets detested him, and they made their feelings entirely clear. However, Pershing didn't care. He just ignored it and continued to hand out demerits. Along with Blackjack, cadets came up with a list of cruel nicknames for him, including Farmer John, the Widow's Mite, and Wooden Willie. When the Spanish-American War broke out in 1898, as captain, he rejoined his regiment, the 10th Cavalry, with the role of supply quartermaster officer. Pershing criticised the lack of preparation and sanitation of living conditions endured by the troops, even before they arrived in Cuba. At Chickamauga camp, the latrines were so badly located that the water supply became contaminated. Swarms of flies carried typhoid germs from filthy surroundings in the training camps during the summer, and on the whole there resulted in such a serious epidemic of that disease, especially among the volunteers, that it became a national scandal. Arriving in Cuba, Pershing and the regiment participated in the Battle of San Juan Heights, coming under sustained Spanish fire. Pershing would later be retroactively awarded a Silver Star citation for this action in 1919. Of his troops, Pershing observed, "The men took cover only when ordered to do so, and exposed themselves fearlessly when crossing the open spaces." One of Pershing's commanders stated, "Pershing is the coolest man under fire I ever saw." In Cuba, Pershing contracted malaria. Returning on leave in 1899 to Chicago, where his parents now lived, he had a severe attack, being treated with quinine, but it took him a full year to recover, suffering severe chills every other day. Speaking of previously escaping the disease in his youth, Pershing stated, "Malaria was very prevalent in Missouri when I was a boy. But thanks to my father's custom of giving us whiskey and quinine every autumn or fall, I had escaped having it." Well, that sure beats having to take those horrendous Paladrin tablets, I guess. After the war, Pershing was assigned to the newly acquired Philippines. He was ordered to sail aboard the hospital ship Missouri, which was travelling via the Suez Canal. To avoid the slower pace of the hospital ship across the Atlantic, Pershing instead took a faster liner. This allowed him a few weeks of sightseeing in Europe. In his memoirs, he stated he arrived first in Liverpool, spent a day touring Chester, and then continued on to London. In London, Pershing would explore the capital thoroughly, being particularly impressed with the Tower of London and Hampton Court. He would state, "Though the British were then in the midst of the Boer War, London was going about its business unperturbed. In conversation, one constantly heard the names of Kitchener of Khartoum and Field Marshal Lord Roberts, also of Jan Smuts and Paul Kruger, and occasionally of the Kaiser, whose unfriendly utterances gave the British some uneasiness even then." In Europe, he would meet with various US embassy representatives and attachés during his journey. Travelling onwards to Suez to rendezvous with his ship, he visited Paris, Italy, and also Egypt. On arrival in the Philippines, he served in the department of Mindanao and Jolo, and was involved in operations to suppress the Filipino insurrection. He was cited for bravery for actions on the Cagayan River whilst attempting to destroy a Philippine stronghold. He served with the 1st Cavalry Regiment and later was assigned to the 15th Cavalry Regiment as an intelligence officer participating in actions against the Moros. His experience here laid the groundwork for his later leadership during the Moro Rebellion, where he eventually became the military governor of Moro Province. In 1903, he returned to the US and caused a stir when Teddy Roosevelt tried to have him promoted to colonel. The Army General Staff rejected this as it went against Army regulations and seniority protocol. You couldn't just skip from being a captain to a colonel. The only exception being a president could promote a man to general rank. Bear that in mind. Pershing spent a year as Assistant Chief of Staff in the Southwest Army Division in Oklahoma, and after a short stint at War College, on Roosevelt's insistence, was assigned as military attaché in Tokyo. In 1905, he married Senator's daughter, Helen Frances Warren. His father-in-law's political connections would aid his career. The couple would have 4 children. After serving as an observer in the Japanese-American War, Roosevelt got his wish, and Pershing was promoted from captain directly to brigadier general, bypassing 862 more senior officers, an extremely rare move. President Roosevelt made this promotion impressed by Pershing's leadership and service in earlier campaigns, though no doubt it ruffled a few feathers. Between 1908 and 1913, Pershing served in France as military attaché at the US Embassy, being sent as a military observer in the Balkans, and was later stationed in the Philippines, where he commanded Fort McKinley and governed Moro Province. For his actions at the 1913 Battle of Budbaksak, he was later awarded the Distinguished Service Cross retroactively in 1940, despite initially declining a Medal of Honor recommendation. In 1914, he was placed in command of 8th Brigade in Presidio, San Francisco, but the brigade was rapidly deployed to Fort Bliss in Texas in response to the Mexican Revolution. Whilst in Texas, Pershing received devastating news. His wife and 3 young daughters had tragically died in a house fire. Only his 6-year-old son survived. Pershing then led a punitive expedition into Mexico to attempt to capture Pancho Villa, who had conducted several raids across the border. We touch on this in my video regarding Patton, who was involved in this campaign. The expedition covered nearly 400 miles in the Chihuahua Desert region, routing Pancho's forces but failing to capture him. When the United States entered the Great War, Pershing was appointed commander of the American Expeditionary Force. Under his leadership, during the course of the war, over 2 million Americans would serve overseas under him. It was the largest overseas deployment in US military history to that point. Pershing was firmly committed to maintaining American independence and command, refusing to allow US forces to be absorbed into British or French units. The decision created tension with Allied leaders. According to some sources, British Commander Sir Douglas Haig described Pershing as very obstinate and stupid. Pershing believed American forces should immediately go on the offensive. He famously declared, "An American soldier was not trained to dig trenches. He was trained to fight." Pershing advocated for a return to open warfare, emphasising mobility, marksmanship and aggressive assaults as a way to break the trench warfare stalemate. However, many European commanders criticised this approach, noting that it echoed the outdated strategies that they had abandoned earlier in the war. They argued Pershing's tactics failed to fully account for the deadly realities of modern warfare. Critics also contended that his insistence on offensive operations and his reluctance to adopt more coordinated artillery infantry tactics led to unnecessarily high casualties, particularly in major battles like the Meuse-Argonne offensive. Some subordinate officers, like Douglas MacArthur, would agree with this and viewed Pershing as a desk officer who was stuck in his ways. Nevertheless, Pershing remained convinced that American strength lay in an independent, unified command being fielded. He stated, "In my opinion, the Allies will not win unless the United States can form an independent army." Due to the effects of trench warfare on soldiers' feet, in January 1918, Pershing oversaw the creation of an improved combat boot, the 1918 trench boot, which became known as the Pershing boot. During 1918, Pershing saw the need for a dedicated military police corps, and the first US Army MP school was established in France. For this, he is considered the founding father of the United States military police. Pershing controversially continued offensive operations right up to the scheduled armistice at 11 a.m. on the 11th of November 1918. This resulted in 3,500 American casualties, including many deaths after the armistice had already been signed, but before it took effect. Pershing opposed the armistice and believed only that by bringing about total victory on the battlefield would Germany be truly defeated. By halting the attacks early, he thought, Germany would have an excuse to say they weren't defeated, and that would give them more leverage in negotiations. He stated, "It was incomprehensible that we should halt operations when the enemy was at our mercy." In 1919, at the height of his popularity and fame, he was promoted to the unique rank of General of the Armies, senior to a 5-star general. This was the highest rank in the US Army. George Washington and Ulysses S. Grant also retroactively received this rank. Pershing was even touted as a Republican Party nominee in the 1920 US election, but not naturally a politician, he refrained from participation. Appointed Army Chief of Staff in 1921, he shaped the National Defense Program and designed a new permanent framework for the US Army. He also chaired the American Battle Monuments Commission, helping to design and oversee cemeteries across Europe. He retired in 1924. In 1931, he would go on to publish his memoir in 2 volumes, which was My Experiences in the Great War. He admitted that he wasn't a great writer and joked, I'm paraphrasing, but he would rather fight 4 more wars than have to rewrite his experiences of one war. To be honest, having gone through some of his memoirs, they are a bit dry actually, so I kind of agree with him on that one. Pershing would remain a respected figure until his death in 1948. His US medal awards are Army Distinguished Service Cross, Army Distinguished Service Medal, Silver Star, Indian Campaign Medal, Spanish Campaign Medal, Army of Cuban Occupation Medal, Philippine Campaign Medal, Mexican Service Medal, and a World War I Victory Medal with 15 battle clasps. Many of these medals were retroactively awarded years after Pershing's various actions and campaigns, such as his Silver Star and Distinguished Service Cross. He also authorised and received the Army of Occupation of Germany Medal. Issued in 1941, the medal had a profile of Pershing on its obverse. Pershing, therefore, became the only living soldier in the history of the US Army, and only one of 4 in the entire US Armed Forces, eligible to wear a medal with his own likeness on it. Foreign awards for me seem difficult to pin down and confirm for Pershing, as he received so many, not only for his leadership role in World War I of the Allied forces, but also as US Army Chief of Staff. He also received many more decorations over the course of his retirement in gratitude for his past service. From previous videos as well, this Army Chief of Staff role seems to attract lots of exotic awards whenever the US Army enters a training or support alliance with another country, as well as foreign visits and dignitaries, etc. So it is quite difficult. I've seen a picture of him wearing a croix de guerre with palm and French military medal or medal militaire. He also would have received a Knight's Grand Cross Order of the Bath from the British. And here is a snapshot of a few more exotic decorations he was probably awarded for, but I just can't confirm, and I don't trust Wikipedia for this. The Order of Karađorđe Star from Serbia, Medal of Solidarity from Panama, the Order of Michael the Brave from Romania, the Order of the Golden Grain from China, possibly modern-day Taiwan, and the Order of Prince Danilo I from Montenegro. Clearly, there's going to be a lot more awards and decorations that he received, but that's just a quick snapshot. Thanks for watching. I hope you found some value from this, and I'll see you in the next one.